Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Just got a chance to check my phone and look at some of the moves that have broke since we started this show, and we are in for a loaded free agency class this year. Super excited to get into all of that. But before we move on to today's moves, I do just want to finish off with yesterday's moves. We had some news with the quarterback carousel, of course, headlined by Russell Wilson, but some additional moves as well, and just some various contract extensions, some releases, and a trade demand. So we're going to touch on all of that. Just a reminder for our live viewers to use that comment section. Talk to me about what your thoughts are on the free agency period here. Make this show as interactive as possible. But starting out here, we are going to talk about the other big contract that it was handed out with the quarterback market this offseason, and that was Baker Mayfield agreeing to a $100 million deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to stay with them. Ultimately, I don't think this is too shocking of a move. It is expensive, which maybe caught some people off guard, but $30 million was pretty much the price it was going to be. Now, who were these other teams that were really vying for Baker? Hadn't really been reported, so I don't know. Maybe that was by design of the Buccaneers not wanting to get into a bidding war. 33 mil, I suppose, is a pretty fair price for the level of production that he got last season. It was a career year for Baker, finished with career highs in most passing statistics. He was inside the top 10 in a lot of these categories as well across the NFL as a whole. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are still in a pretty weak NFC South division, and I do think that they have another chance to run it back and make their way into the playoffs again. They weren't a tremendous team last season necessarily. They finished 9-7. They had gotten blown out to the Saints with just a couple weeks left in the year, and at that point, that was when I was sort of buying into them, and they reminded me that they're not that level of a great team, but they do end up making the playoffs. They do end up winning a playoff game. So I think to abandon the process as a whole and accept taking a step back when you were just a playoff winning team, it's a little bit tough to do so. And Baker still has a lot of doubters, but I don't really see all that cause for concern in terms of him regressing again. I know that this has been a little bit of a story you can argue in his career is when he led the Browns to the playoff win. Next year, he took a step back. I personally feel like that was more so and due to the fact that he was playing through an injury. He was trying to gut it out for his team, and as a result, the Browns there blamed him for not being good enough, and they moved on from him. But I feel like Baker should be able to return to a very similar form, having another year in the Tampa Bay offense. Now, they did lose their offensive coordinator, Dave Canales, who I think is a very quarterback-friendly coach. We saw him help bring Baker back this year. We saw him the year prior in Seattle, help rejuvenate Geno Smith. So I do think that this is a loss, but they were able to bring back Mike Evans again. So Baker will still have his number one option. I do like the offensive line. I know that they got pushed around a little bit against Detroit in the divisional round, but they have the cornerstone tackle in Tristan Wirfs, and I think that they can continue to build on this. I would like to see them go out and get a running back. We've seen 2-3 now, I suppose, of the top guys already exit in free agency. So we're going to have to see what they do as a whole. But again, I don't think this was all too shocking of a move for the Buccaneers. Briefly here, on the note of quarterback, we also did have a QB trade in Mac Jones being moved from the Patriots to the Jaguars. The return for him was just a 6th round pick. This was more so of the Patriots turning the page here after things with Mac did not go well the past 2 seasons, and the Jaguars hoping to secure more of a reliable backup situation after CJ Beathard was, it's CJ Beathard. The expectations weren't high, but he was not the answer when Trevor Lawrence was dealing with those injuries. The question I feel like is sort of natural to ask at this point is, can Mac Jones ever be a starter in the NFL again? The odds are that the answer is no, but I do think that if Mac Jones had ended up in a different situation coming into the NFL, he could have been a lot better. Would he have ever been elite? No, but I always sort of saw him as a Kirk Cousins ceiling type of player, which isn't a bad comparison by any means. Kirk Cousins, he's going to get paid this offseason, so was he ever going to be elite? No, but he could have been a starter on a playoff team. He was his rookie year when he helped lead the Patriots to double-digit wins and a playoff appearance, and he wasn't even the issue. I know they got stomped by the Bills in the playoffs that year, but I wouldn't have put that on Mac by any means. He was good his rookie year, and maybe he can get a fresh start here in Jacksonville where the expectations are lower. He can spend a year on the bench, sort of get his fundamentals back under him and try and turn this around. But enough on that. Moving on to the Chiefs here, who were able to get Chris Jones back on a monster deal. 5 years, $158.8 million. $101 million guaranteed. So this is a huge deal for Jones, who was the top priority for the Chiefs coming into the offseason, and he ends up getting paid. They treated him like that, gave him an annual salary of $31.75 million per season. It is very well deserved. Chris Jones is the premier player at his position. This is slightly more than the contract that Aaron Donald fetched a couple years ago, coming off of their Super Bowl win. Chris Jones is a couple years younger, so I think that this naturally makes sense. He will be the second highest paid defender in the NFL next season, only behind Nick Bosa in terms of annual salary. The Chiefs talked up a big game about making sure that Chris Jones was going to be back, and they brought in the money to do so. So have to feel good about that if you are a Chiefs fan, because he is just so important to that locker room, to that defense, and they're going to have likely some other changes around him. So making sure he is back was a big deal for them. We also had a trade that sent Jerry Jeudy from the Broncos to the Browns. The Browns gave up just a 5th and 6th round pick for Jeudy. Jeudy, I wouldn't consider him a bust in terms of him being an unplayable player, but he's definitely been disappointing after being the 15th overall pick in the 2020 draft. He had the best season of his young career in 2022, but took a step back last season. And it's tough looking back at that 2020 class because he was the second wide receiver drafted, and many of the standout guys in the NFL currently were a part of that class as well. CeeDee Lamb went 2 picks after him. Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk were both first rounders. T. Higgins and Michael Pittman went early in the 2nd round. So definitely disappointing. Jeudy, I think that there is still a level of talent there that can be tapped into, and it's just not going to be with the Broncos if it ever is going to come into fruition again, because the Broncos are in a very tough salary cap position. They were going to have to pay Jeudy just under $13 million this upcoming season, so they decided to part ways with him there. They get some low draft capital in return, but I gotta say, this is a pretty nice deal for the Browns, where they trade just a 5th and 6th round pick, which is the exact same package to a degree, of what they gave up for Amari Cooper ahead of the 2022 season, and Cooper has been a great pickup for them. He was phenomenal down the stretch of this past season to help them get to the playoffs. So this could be a really nice payout for the Browns next year. Deshaun Watson is ideally going to come back for them. He's been disappointing to say the least since being traded to Cleveland. Now this is the year where if he's going to turn things around, this is probably it, and the Browns can save some sort of face if he does do so. But on the note of wide receivers, we also had updates on two of the franchise tagged wide receivers this weekend in T. Higgins and Michael Pittman. Just referred to them as well as part of that draft class with Jerry Jeudy. Pittman and the Colts agreed this morning on a contract extension, 3 years, $71.5 million. Talked about it when they first tagged him. I love the idea of the Colts locking Pittman down. He's a great player. He seems to be very well liked and well respected within that locker room. A real professional guy, and I think that having Anthony Richardson ideally come back from injury this year and try and ramp up for his sophomore year, they are going to want to have a player such as Pittman in the locker room to help elevate the play of Richardson and that receiver group as a whole, which does have some talent in a young Josh Downs. They have a handful of different tight ends that they can throw out there as well. The Colts were right on the brink of making the playoffs last season, despite Richardson missing the majority of the year and Gardner Minshew stepping in for them. So maybe they can take the next step in this upcoming year. But on the other end, while Pittman and the Colts work out a long-term deal, the sides between T. Higgins and the Bengals are very far apart. So much so that T. Higgins reportedly requested a trade this morning. The talks of a long-term deal haven't been productive over the past couple seasons, and now he is on the franchise tag for this upcoming season. He wants to find a new place to settle down long-term. I never thought that a long-term deal in Cincy really made all too much sense for the franchise, where they're already going to pay Jamar Chase, who is a better receiver, and they have so much money going into Joe Burrow over the course of the next handful of years. So I didn't think that wrapping up all that money in T. Higgins made a lot of sense for them. It is going to be interesting for the Bengals here, where I personally think if they can get T. Higgins to not hold out and play through the course of the season, it might be just the most beneficial move for them to stick with him on the one-year deal and try and work for that Super Bowl this upcoming season. Higgins had a down season last year, and granted that was with a very injury-riddled quarterback situation with Burrow last year, and the level of quarterback play wasn't as high, but I'm not sure what they could necessarily get for him in some of these trade talks, and I feel like for them, compensation would be nice, but I also feel like it wouldn't be harmful for them to just take this season as it is, understand you're going to lose the guy in free agency next year, and give it everything you have to be a Super Bowl contender this year, because I do believe they are sort of the biggest rivals towards the Chiefs in the AFC, and I think it could be very beneficial unless they're going to get some real compensation and find a way to, find another star receiver in the draft, which is still very possible. This is a really nice wide receiver class, but the Bengals have had one of the best receiver rooms in the NFL the past handful of years, with Chase, with Higgins, with Tyler Boyd, and now they're going to have to make some decisions. I do like the guy that they drafted out of Princeton last year. He showed a couple flashes, I thought, but I feel like they should, if they can, run back into next season with T. Higgins on the franchise tag. And Other than that, the other big storyline from this weekend was Eric Armstead being released from the 49ers. This wasn't all too surprising either. Armstead is a very nice player. He was a little bit of a slow developer in that 49ers system, and he worked his way up into a very nice player, but he also was set to be very expensive for the 49ers this year. San Francisco can save themselves a handful of crucial money going into next year by parting ways with him. And again, Armstead, for as nice of a player as he is and sort of the name recognition that comes with him, I also feel like when it got to the playoffs, it was just very underwhelming in terms of the level of production that their front seven was able to get. Now, Nick Bosa sort of turned himself around. Chase Young had some moments, but definitely underwhelming from what was seen to be as one of the best front fours in the NFL. The Niners can save up to as much of $17.8 million with the release of Armstead, so we will keep you updated on those tabs. But that is going to be all for this segment. We are going to take our second break, and when we come back on the other side, we will be diving into all of today's action, trying to keep up with as much as we can. So stick with us, and we will be right back.